If there's one thing that you can say about this Oklahoma football team in this season, they have a way of making it interesting every single week. Thanks for joining. My name is Jason Ray. Thanks for joining Boomer Breakdown. Oklahoma wins 28-21, keeps their Big 12 championship hopes alive, keeps their even slim but still playoff chances alive as Oklahoma survives. I think that's the best way to say it. A 28-21 victory over Iowa State. Oklahoma was good at times, and then at times was kind of the same team that we've seen over and over again all year. But I think the key thing, especially right now, this time of the year, is find a way to win and then move on. Oklahoma moves to 10-1. We'll face Oklahoma State next week, and just a gigantic bedlam game, one of the biggest ones that we've seen in quite some time. But we'll certainly get to that as the um, as this podcast unfolds, and then just as the rest of the week unfolds. But just kind of a quick synopsis of my thoughts. Kind of watching the game from beginning to end. I'll start from a positive. Kennedy Brooks was good. Again today, over 100 yards. I believe he surpassed the 3,000 yard mark for his career. Only the 11th running back ever in the history of Oklahoma football to um, to to surpass that 3,000 yard mark for his career. So even though he didn't really get a ton of carries, 17 carries for 115 yards, and the touchdown. So I think so he was good, and I think the other bright spot for Oklahoma was the defensive line. Defensive line played probably their best game of the year. 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. Forced 3 turnovers in the game. So played really well defensively, particularly up front. So I think those are the two things that were very good and very strong for Oklahoma. So there's unfortunately there's a lot of negatives. I mean, particularly um, towards the last part of the game. I think Oklahoma just continues to find ways to keep teams in games. Oklahoma had an opportunity, I think, up 21-7. Iowa State turns the ball over, and then Caleb Williams turns it right back over, and then ends up being a game, a close game, really a closer game than it really needed to be. I think, like I said, defensively, the defensive line was pretty good. Defense came up big. Defense, I think, even though they did not play that well the last couple, 2 or 3 drives, they just found a way to get a turnover there late, to find a way to get a stop, and won the game. I thought offensive line still was not strong, was not good. I think Caleb Williams again looked pretty bad for 2 consecutive games. We'll kind of get into that more in depth here in a little bit. Um, the running game was not great. Still ran for 200 yards. Ran the ball a little bit better late in the game. Like I said, offensive line wasn't good. A couple of guys got replaced. I know that at the offensive tackle position, Tyrese Robinson got replaced, and then Andrew Rain got replaced as well. So it's kind of a revolving door there on the offensive line. Consistently, Caleb Williams having trouble seeing the whole field. Those that watched it on TV and that weren't there, Joel Klatt really talked about that a lot. Just his inability to see the field throughout the game. I mean, there were some times where the receivers weren't getting separation, weren't getting open, but there was a lot of times where the receivers were open and Caleb Williams just wasn't seeing the field just as well as he really needs to. So I think it'll be interesting. I mean, coming in next week, two games in a row of really subpar play. Today, 8 out of 18, 87 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, below 50% passing, I should say, below 50% last week though as well. So interesting to see what Lincoln Riley will do going into this game against Oklahoma State, which is clearly the best defense that Oklahoma will have played all year. So he's young. You expect a lot of freshman mistakes out of him, but at the same time, going into Bedlam, crowd's going to be jacked, and Just a tough position. Do you go with a guy like Rattler who has, even though he's not played extremely well this season, he's got a little bit more experience, especially in big games like that. Played really, really well last year against Oklahoma State in that, I believe, 51-13 win at home. Maybe it's 41-13 over Oklahoma State. And so what do? You think what you lose in mobility with Rattler against Caleb Williams is you I think you have more downfield presence. I think you have the ability to stretch the field a lot more. So I think that'll be interesting to talk about and to think about as certainly want to get your thoughts on what you guys, not necessarily calling anybody out from a negative perspective, just really from a strategic perspective, what gives Oklahoma the best chance to win. Again, I thought Oklahoma's game plan was very, very bad in this game. I think it kind of looked like Riley didn't really know what he wanted to do early and just kind of throughout the game. I think Oklahoma he's had a bad problem with this over the last couple of years of giving up on the run or not even giving the run a chance. One of the best drives that Oklahoma had in this game was almost completely run game with Kennedy Brooks there late and ran the ball really, really well. So I think that will be. Uh, he's just struggled kind of getting a hold on this team. And like I said, just the play calling wasn't incredibly, wasn't impressive to me and wasn't what you need. I think Oklahoma has to be at their absolute best to be able to win this game next Saturday against Oklahoma State in Bethlehem. So, and you guys can fact check me. I believe if Kansas State beats Baylor, we're gonna have back to back Bedlam games no matter who wins. I think that's the way that's gonna play out if that happens. So I think Oklahoma State has to win their game tonight, obviously, and then if Kansas State beats Baylor as well. So yeah, interesting to talk about. If you guys want to talk. Me personally, this isn't a playoff team. Um, I don't think this team is good enough to play in the playoffs. I don't think this team is good enough to compete really with anyone in the top 10 right now from a playoff perspective. So, granted, yes, Oklahoma could get to the playoffs. I think based on some things that could happen, down the stretch here. But I don't believe that Oklahoma is a playoff team right now. Having said that, there has been some things that has happened today that has worked out to their benefit. Michigan State absolutely got obliterated by Ohio State, so for all intents and purposes, they're out of the discussion. Wake Forest got again the same thing happened to them against Clemson. They're out of the conversation. So then you really have when you look at this, look at this in totality. You've got Georgia that has a playoff spot locked up. They play Georgia Tech next week, and then they'll play, most likely Alabama in the SEC championship game. So Georgia wins or loses in that game, they're in. So you got Georgia as one spot. Alabama wins if say they win today against Arkansas. They beat Auburn in the Auburn Bowl, and then they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game therein. However, if you're a proponent of Oklahoma trying to get them to the playoffs, you absolutely are rooting for Georgia to win that game and continue winning. If they win, it means the SEC probably, well, not probably, they definitely will only get one team in. If that's the case, the other thing that you look at just chaos in the Pac-12. Oregon plays at Utah tonight. I'm not sold on Oregon. I think Ohio State should be the number 2 ranked team in the country, no worse than number 3 right now. No matter what Oregon does tonight, I think Ohio State should jump them. But from a Big Ten perspective, you really have Ohio State or Michigan. Those are the 2 teams that are going to, potentially make the playoffs for the Big Ten. Ohio State goes to Michigan next week, and then likely plays either Wisconsin or Minnesota in the Big Ten championship game. So you've got two spots there, and I think that the next two spots are really kind of up for grabs. You've got, looking at perhaps Oklahoma or Oklahoma State getting into the mix there. And then you've got a Pac-12 team. So Oklahoma fans, root for Utah if you want Oklahoma to have a chance in there tonight, to really get kind of Oregon out of the fray, so to speak. So I think most Oklahoma fans will be rooting for Kansas State, just in general tonight, just because Baylor's ahead of Oklahoma, but a Kansas State win, like some of you guys have mentioned, um, solidifies Oklahoma's spot in the Big 12 championship game, no matter what happens in Bedlam next week. So, and then obviously Baylor's ranked ahead of Oklahoma, and then you've got a couple of teams that are ahead of Oklahoma, but the fact that they won't have a conference championship game, I think will probably lead to their demise, so to speak. Notre Dame's a team that's ranked ahead of Oklahoma, and then Mississippi's another team that's ranked ahead of Oklahoma in the in the playoff ranking. So I think Oklahoma, should they win out, should they beat Oklahoma State twice, they would certainly jump those two teams. So I think it comes down to I think if Oklahoma was to win out, it would come down to an Oklahoma versus versus a Cincinnati situation, or or an Oregon if they happen to keep going undefeated. I think if Oregon goes undefeated the rest of the way, they probably get in over a one-loss Oklahoma team, just kind of based on how um, less than impressive Oklahoma has been through the complete totality of the season. I think that the Oklahoma versus Cincinnati conversation would be interesting. I think Cincinnati probably gets in Oklahoma, but I think it's a over Oklahoma, but I think it's an interesting conversation. So whatever you guys want to talk about, um, I do think Oklahoma has fairly, not completely solidified, but they've got a good you've got a good opportunity for Oklahoma to make it to a New Year's Six bowl game with 10 wins here. So depends on what happens with everyone else, but I think Oklahoma at the very least is up there in the contention and in that conversation for that. Um, so let's talk through just kind of the overall impressions of Oklahoma right now after this game, and then and taking some of your comments and questions about um, looking at Oklahoma in terms of the trajectory against Oklahoma State, playoff team, and then would love the conversation Caleb Williams versus Spencer Rattler. What do you think? What do you think gives Oklahoma the best chance to win Bedlam, and then more than that, win a conference championship this year? So let me go through a lot of comments here about just about this poor play calling on offense and defense. The last possessions I thought were a little bit. Completely agree, Ryan. Grinch tends to get conservative in times like that for whatever reason. Yeah, he didn't bring as much pressure as they had been in the past, or throughout the game, um, and then really didn't do it as much as they could. They kind of got fortunate for whatever reason. They never doubled Kohler. They kept him. He was wide open through you know, last two possessions. So I think Oklahoma got lucky to a certain extent, and I thought the play calling was very poor throughout the entire game, on the offensive side of the ball. Um, with a struggling quarterback, Oklahoma really needed to rely on the run game, and they really didn't. So um, I think that's interesting going into the next game, because I said they've got to rely on that defense, and they've got to rely on a solid running game. So the offensive line needs to be really, really good against the best defense in the Big 12 is Oklahoma State by far at this point. Greg, the learning curve is now in effect. Absolutely, I think and there's some conversations. I don't really. He's not played as well as I thought he would in these last two games, Greg. But it's definitely not any time to give up on him. he's the quarterback of the future, and this is good learning experience. I mean, specifically these last two games. However, this game you had another poor performance, but you still found a way to win. You don't want to live on borrowed time too much, but so that's why I think it's interesting. If it was me, I might make the change and go back to Rattler because I just think he might give you a little bit um, more opportunity to be successful, opportunity to win this game, just based on his ability to see the field, maybe a little bit better than Caleb is, because it looks like it's going a little bit too fast for him right now. And I think the comment here is right on, just in terms of just the defensive scheme and better defensive players that he's seeing now versus where he was in the past. So against the likes of Texas and Texas Tech and Kansas and some of those other teams. So and then knowing how much better Oklahoma State is on defense than even Baylor and Iowa State will be interesting to see what that looks like. Return trip, yeah, Texas. It's man. We talk about how things are a little bit tough for Oklahoma, not as good as we've been in the past, and talent and everything around that. But Texas, I think what they've dropped to, are they 4-7 now? I think they were 4-6 coming into this game, 4-7. I think they've lost six straight. I believe they host Kansas State to finish the season next year. So that's going to be something interesting to keep your eye on. It's hard to believe a situation where someone, like at somewhere like Texas or anywhere at a big time school could potentially could potentially lose their job and get fired after 1 year. But if you're at a school like Texas and you throw out a 4-8 season your first year, especially after the guy that was fired last year they lost three games a year ago, maybe three or four, I can't remember exactly. But um, yeah, I mean, that will be something interesting to watch over the next couple of weeks. Is there any chance could he possibly lose his job after 1 year? That would be tough. I mean, it's almost a wasted year, just in general, especially on the heels of kind of going to the SEC within maybe next year, but within the next couple of years for sure. So, very, very interesting to watch. Um, I think that's in reference to Caleb Williams. Let's see, what questions do you have? I saw it happen 2 weeks in a row, so I've waited my claims. Yeah, I mean, I think Ryan, I'm with you. He hasn't really, I think, and he's not really. Obviously, he had the great run to start the game, but after that, he wasn't efficient in the passing game. Obviously, 8 out of 18. He wasn't making great decisions in the run game as well. So yeah, I I think you probably have to play Rattler, have him ready to come in at any point, but I think Rattler gives you the best chance to win next week. Not saying that Rattler's a better quarterback. I think right now maybe he does give you that best chance to win. Um, yep. Running game is improving. I think the O line is just kind of up and down. I would like to see. I think someone else mentioned it. I would like to see Swinson and Conjal in the game. I think both of those kids played pretty well today. And Oklahoma just has some. They're just not as talented on the offensive line as they have been. We've talked about that, and just scheme is very complicated for Oklahoma. It's something that really needs to be evaluated after the end of the season, and part of that is not getting some of the players that they've had in the past there. So I think that's continued to be a struggle for Oklahoma, but I think combination with the scheme and the recruiting has got Oklahoma to where they are with the offensive line. So they need to have their best game of the season next week without a doubt. Um, okay, I'm not saying he won't be elite. He's got to improve. He will. Yeah, I think that's fine. He's probably playing before he's really ready. To be honest with you, I mean, we thought this was his team Next year, a lot of us thought that Rattler would, based on the season that he was projected to have, thought that he would probably, have a good season and then go to the NFL after the season, and he still may do that. The latter part of it is, but would be a great story for him overall if he gets the job here this week and leads Oklahoma to a couple of victories over Oklahoma State. That would be good, a good ending to a kind of a bad season for him, but would certainly propel him to the NFL. I think if that would happen, without a doubt. Yep, I think there's a lot of consensus here that maybe Rattler gives Oklahoma the best opportunity to win that game. Cam, not a playoff team. Definitely agree. We get yeah, Michigan State's not making the playoffs. There's zero chance at this point. They have no chance to even make the conference championship game. They have two losses. There's no chance. I think a two-loss Oklahoma or Oklahoma State team would probably have a better chance over Michigan State at this point. So I think it's Michigan or Ohio State. Either one of those teams will be the teams that will make the playoffs from the Big Ten. I mean, there's a I mean, it's a slim possibility, but there's a possibility that the Big Ten could get shut out. Let's say, whoever wins, the game next week between Michigan and Ohio State. Obviously, they're in the Big Ten championship game, but one of those teams gets beat by Wisconsin or even Minnesota. Probably was going to be Wisconsin, but if either one of those teams loses, then they're probably obviously the loser between Ohio State and Michigan is out, and then if they were to lose again, they would get out. They would be out of the playoff mix. But don't really expect the way Ohio State's playing right now. I would be shocked if they lose to either Michigan or Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Let's see. Agreed. I'm kind of the same way. In a normal year, if I felt like Oklahoma could, now if Oklahoma ended up playing a Cincinnati in the playoffs, I think that's an opportunity that they would play favorably against. However, anyone else, Ohio State and Georgia, not a great matchup for them. Um, It really has, Weston. It's been I think this is me personally, and again, I'm not calling for anyone to get fired or anything like that. I think this has been the worst year for Riley. The offense isn't anywhere near as good. It looks very confused at times. Offensive line play has been bad. Quarterback play has been very inconsistent. Play calling has been very weird for me. This team doesn't really have an identity. So I think it's been a bad year for him. I think just the play calling has been, and I don't know if it's one of those things where he's having trouble managing the game as a head coach, and then obviously being the offensive coordinator and being the quarterback coach. But there's a couple of things. If I was, a couple of things for me looking on the outside looking in. Obviously, I'm not inside the program. I think they need to on offense. I think they need to take a hard look at the schemes that they're running from an offensive line perspective. They need to find a way to make it more simple. Um, just a simple stretch play is something that Oklahoma never runs, and every single team in the country, and on Sundays has that play in their playbook, and it's just something that Oklahoma doesn't do. You've heard a lot if anyone listens to Gabe, or if you watch the Gabe Eicher and Teddy Lehman, or if you watch the broadcast today, they talked a lot about the gap scheme versus the zone run scheme, where Oklahoma has traditionally been a very gap oriented blocking scheme on the running plays, and they've not really been very successful at that this year. The zone run scheme has been much more. They haven't run it a lot. They were pretty successful with it against Kansas State, but they kind of went away from it since then. So I think those are a couple of things that I would look at specifically, if you can kind of tell how it's been. It hasn't been super helpful for Oklahoma just from a recruiting perspective as well. So I think that's one thing. Bringing an offensive coordinator in here or a play caller, whatever you want to call them, If it's not someone that you feel comfortable with on staff, like a Cale Gundy or a Beanbo or whatever that might look like, bringing someone in. I've always been a big proponent. Steve Spurrier is the only person, the only now Ryan Day does a good job of it with Ohio State, but at the same time, you know, Spurrier's been the only one that's won a national championship being the offensive coordinator and the head coach. So it's something I'm not a very big proponent of, being a head coach, being a play caller at the same time. So I think this was, for me, it'd be something that I would look at. And then the other thing defensively, this the speed D thing, I don't I it's just it's kind of an experiment. I don't know that it's worked. I mean, they played well today, defensive line, but I think they've more times than not, the defensive line has got pushed around, and they're going to get pushed around once they play these teams that are really good up front. So, specifically if Oklahoma were to get in the playoffs, if they were to play a team like Georgia, a team like Alabama, a team like Ohio State, they would get pushed around a bit on the offensive line versus that defensive line. Um, interesting comment here, Dan. It's kind of unbelievable that Oklahoma's a 10-win team, and I don't know if, I don't know if they're the worst 10-win team, but when you look back and you think about this team, they've had really maybe one game, 2 games maybe that they were impressive in. They played well against TCU, they played well against Texas Tech, but I think overall from outside of that, they haven't been impressive for an entire game. So, they put it together at times today, but then, they were up 21-7. They had an opportunity to finish a game. When you're talking about the playoffs, how impressive would it be for Oklahoma to win the game 28-10 or 31-10, versus, kind of sweating it out, winning 28-21? They're not going to get a whole lot of benefit of the doubt from the playoff committee for this, from this perspective. So, this is definitely the, worst, least talented, whatever you want to say. Probably this is the worst performing Oklahoma team, obviously, since Riley has been here. Um, Probably in the last 5, 6 years, from my perspective, specifically with everything that they had coming into the season. Definitely. Um, See, there's some conversation here, back and forth with a few of you guys. I love the conversation. Think Oklahoma's the third or fourth best team in the nation. Me personally, I think Oklahoma is probably. I mean, where they're at, 13th is fairly close to where they are. Anywhere. I would say anywhere between 13 and 20 is where Oklahoma is. I don't. Now they're probably gonna. I mean, depending on what some things happen here, the rest of the day today, they're probably gonna be in the 8 to 10 range, maybe. For the uh, next when the polls come out on Tuesday. Martin Chase. If this is the Martin Chase that used to play at Oklahoma, welcome. Thanks for joining the podcast here, and the question, Martin. Remember watching you in the '90s, man. Loved watching you play. So if that's you, appreciate it. If um, My take on Lincoln Riley, even with a young quarterback, granted, I wouldn't consider Spencer Rattler a young quarterback. He's been in the system. Yes, he's only played 1 year, but he's still been in the system for a couple of years. Sit and watch Jalen Hurts, so really been in the system for 3 years. Definitely, I wouldn't consider him a young quarterback. Caleb Williams, absolutely. I think there's just some maturation that's going on with Caleb right now, Martin. I think, he's like I said, he was put in a position based on the way he played against Texas and based on the way the team responded to him, put in a position where he almost had to play, because of how well he was playing and just kind of how poorly that Spencer Rattler was playing. So I think Lincoln Riley's kind of feeling his way around that. He's really not been in a situation where he's had a quarterback controversy, however you wanna see it. But I think for me, Martin, based on the way that Oklahoma has played offensively over the last couple of days and or couple of games, and where Caleb Williams, whether he's hit that freshman wall or whether he's just struggling with kind of the improved defense, I think I would still go with Rattler, but I don't think that he's doing a lot of things bad, Martin, just in terms of the way he is progressing with those two quarterbacks. I think where I'm struggling a little bit with him is really just kind of the play calling. He's not running the ball at the same level that he needs to. And I think at least last week against Baylor, Martin, I think they almost asked Caleb Williams to win the game, and that's just not where he's able what he's able to do right now. He's just not there, and he's just with the experience and talent. I think he's there, but just he just doesn't have the experience yet. Weston, I think they're the top five best teams in the nation. We have the talent. Just have to put it all together to be sure I'm wrong. Notre Dame, Michigan State, Wake Forest are better than OU. I definitely would agree with you on Notre Dame right now. I think Notre Dame's a better team. Michigan State and Wake Forest is interesting. Before today, I probably would have said yes, particularly with Michigan State. But just the way they got completely manhandled, 49-0, just at halftime against Ohio State, leads me to believe that maybe Oklahoma could be a little bit better. Wake Forest is I think Wake Forest and Oklahoma that would be a really good matchup. I think they're both very similar. It's tough. They Clemson's playing a lot better, but Clemson won that game today pretty easily against uh, against Wake Forest. Um, so that it's kind of interesting to see, exactly how that will, um, exactly how that would unfold. Yeah, 48-27 was the score between Clemson and Wake Forest. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. That would be a thought, but I don't know. I would give Oklahoma a slight edge against Michigan State. Notre Dame is better, but I think Wake Forest is really even right there. Um, with him. So think give Caleb some time. The offense will change, but I don't know what's going on with Lincoln. Something seems, yeah, it seems. I don't know if he's distracted. The 2 weeks ago he was out for the press conferences, and kind of talked about it being something that's um, much less boring than people wanted to make it out to be. And then obviously this week with the rumors of the 8-year, $96 million offer on the table from LSU. I tweeted this out, and you guys can flame me if you want. I know he's already basically said that he's not interested in the job, or he enjoys being in Oklahoma. He never really said he's not interested in the job. He just said, my feelings about Oklahoma. If it's true, if he was actually offered $96 million over 8 years at LSU, it's something that you absolutely have to listen to, and wouldn't be surprised if he took it. Wouldn't I mean honestly wouldn't even completely blame him. $12 million a year is hard to pass up. I mean, that's if that was actually what they were going to give him. He's in the 7.5 neighborhood right now, million per year. That's $5 million increase, so it'd be hard to pass up. But and I think we can get into that. Me and Mark kind of got into this conversation a little bit on Wednesday. Where's the job? What's a better job, Oklahoma or LSU? I think you could make an argument for both sides. I think at the very least, the LSU job is no worse than the Oklahoma job, I would say. And I'm sure you guys will have some disagreements. I don't think I wouldn't. It's hard to say that LSU is better, but I think it's at the very least, it's um, it's just as good. Let's see. Don, Michigan, Notre Dame, Cincinnati would all beat Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma would have a hard time with Michigan and Notre Dame. Absolutely. I think Michigan's defense is really, really good. I think the way Notre Dame is playing, I think Notre Dame's better. Cincinnati they've kind of struggled here down the stretch. They look like they're playing pretty well. Today, I think they're up 14 to nothing or 10 to nothing, one of the two, over SMU early on in this game. 14 to nothing. So yeah, I mean, if they can put together an impressive performance against SMU, that will be very, very helpful for them in the playoff conversation. Uh, Rally touch his legs. He's going to fall. He's definitely not mobile. Absolutely. I mean, Cam, you're spot on. Absolutely. Marcus Majors it's a little bit of an anomaly to me. There was a few games ago where he got to play late in the game, and then we really haven't seen a sniff of him since. I don't know if there's the belief that he's not physically ready. I don't know if he in shape, what it is, if he's still in the doghouse because of making himself academically ineligible early on. I don't know what it is, but he's for whatever reason he's not played, and I would like to see him get some touches here and there, especially late in ball games. I think that would be good as kind of a closer as well. Um, I don't agree with that at all. Jason Rattler had one good game against Kansas State. Yeah, I don't know that I've said that he had a lot of good games. I don't think he played well really at all. I think that was my comment. So if I mentioned that I thought he's had a good season, that's absolutely not the case. So I think he's been pretty bad. However, I do think based on the last two games that Caleb Williams has played, Rattler probably gives Oklahoma the better opportunity to win Bedlam. Um, Yeah, Texas will not be eligible for a bowl game. Yeah, Chester, I think this is something that needs to happen. I've said this. I said this from day one, but I think it's becoming more and more apparent over the last couple of years that he needs to, at the very least, hire an offensive coordinator. If he still wants to be quarterback coach, like I don't have a problem with that. But I think I think he needs to bring in a play caller. 405, boy, defense played great, but the offense looked bad. At times, yes. I think at times the defense played really, really well. I think it was overall probably their best game of the year, especially for three quarters. And then they kind of gave up a couple of things late, and had to hold on for the win. But yeah, I think that synopsis is pretty fair. Yeah, agree with that point, Weston, without a doubt. D is I would disagree very strongly with the first part. The defense has not been good all year. I think some of the mesh scheme that Riley does, to your point, is a little bit tough for them. But I would strongly disagree that the defense has been good all year. The defense has massively underachieved this year. Now they were really really good today. I'll give you the for three quarters they were really good, and then they were as dominant as they've been up front all year long. But to say that this defense has been good all year is just not accurate. Yeah, I thought that was Weston. I thought that was the previous series they ran Kennedy Brooks a lot and they ran Eric Gray a lot and they were very successful, and but then they completely got away with that and then ran Caleb Williams. For what reason, I don't know. I thought it was very weird and just puzzling, the play calling. A lot of good skill position. Yeah, and I mean, no matter what happens these last couple of games for whether it's Caleb Williams or Spencer Rattler or whatever, I think the future's still bright. To play at the level that he's played as a true freshman. Even if he's faltered a little bit here down the stretch, is still positive for the outlook for this team. Um, just hope we can keep some of the DL talent for 1 year. It's kind of interesting. Um, Me and my dad had this conversation during the game. I think Isaiah Thomas is. I think they're all gone. I think Isaiah Thomas is gone. I think Nick Benito is gone. I think Perrion Winfrey is gone. So I think you have those three guys that are gone. But I think you'll certainly have Jalen Redmond back. Isaiah Coe has had a really good season for Oklahoma at the defensive tackle position. I think obviously he'll be back. I think you have some young kids on the defensive line that have um, that they have shown that they're capable. Ethan Downs is a guy that has played well, so I think they have a lot of talent up front. But I think some of those guys will probably be gone after this year. Isaiah Thomas is. I would be shocked if he's no longer if he's here. Nick Benito has been kind of up and down. He's good when he wants to be, but he takes plays off a lot of times. Giving Rattler too much credit. He doesn't play well against good defense. He had one good game against Kansas State this year. Yeah, this year so far. I just think that um, he just gives them a better opportunity to win this game right now based on the way he's throwing the ball. Cameron, it's not the quarterback; it is the offensive line. And Rattler is the best option to finish this season. I think for like I said, based not necessarily, I wouldn't have said this 3-4 weeks ago, but based on the way they're throwing the ball. Um, yeah, I don't know, Cam. Good question. I'm not sure. So the O line is bad. Where things come to play really well in relief. Murray needs to be benched. I think they're just trying to find that right combination, and it's really too late in the season to be kind of messing around with that. But I think I would, based on the way they've played, Swinson and Conjal should probably at least if they're not starting, just in the rotation. Definitely. A lot of questions and comments here about the play calling. Defense a terrible ID. He's been on the bench. Has been a total. Let's pump the brakes on that. We'll just agree. We can just agree to disagree, Weston. I don't think Oklahoma's in a great position. Regardless, I think the game plan needs to be rely on your defense. Hope your defensive line is dominating. Rely on the run game, and then just give yourself a opportunity to win the game at the end of the game. That's the one thing that you would hope for. Um, yeah, we'll see, Cam. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is something that they'll actually end up doing or not. But I think it's something that, like I said, those three things are the things that I would look at without a doubt. Keep waiting on you turn. It's not going to happen this year. I think they are who they are at this point. I mean, I think you've got a team that can put it together. They've shown glimpses, but the team has not put it together for 4 quarters. They've not played complementary football all year. Now they could. I mean, they can do it at some point. I think they can do it, but they've not put themselves in position to play that complementary ball. And um, maybe this next week is the week, but it's not happened yet. Yeah, agree, Ryan. Good enough is not looking good. And as of late, I would say this game, I didn't think the defense played well, really, for at least half the game last week against Baylor. You give up 300 yards rushing. I don't consider that a good defensive performance. Um, and I think Creed Humphrey is a much bigger loss on the offensive line than any of us ever thought it would be or care to admit, even at this point. Yep. I'm with you. Has the OU has on both sides of the ball. Hey Barton, I appreciate you joining us. Like I said, I remember you well. I know that was a tough time for Oklahoma football, but I remember how well you played on that defensive line. So keep coming back and keep joining us. Yeah, give a shout out to Martin on here, guys. Let's see. It's a possibility, Cam. I mean, I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility. I mean, based on I think a lot will come down to based on, what the playoff situation, shakes out to be between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and, what Oklahoma does in these 2 games. I mean, if they happen to split or Oklahoma State happens to beat Oklahoma twice, in these next couple of games, I think you've got, um if Oklahoma, let's just say for all intents and purposes, Oklahoma State makes the playoffs. Oklahoma probably goes to the Sugar Bowl. Depends on how that shakes out. Unfortunately could be another game against Alabama. If that's what happens there. But they I think they would be another a large selection for a if neither Oklahoma or Oklahoma State makes the playoffs, and maybe Oklahoma State is ranked ahead of Oklahoma, then maybe Oklahoma could be in a large pick for one of the other New Year's Six Bowl. But that would absolutely be a good matchup without a doubt. Caleb didn't get his year playing against the scout team. It shows when he misses by the Public Cotton Bowl. Yeah, I don't think it was. I don't think it was a Trevor Knight moment. I mean, I see where you say that, but I don't think that just because he continued to play well, in these games up until the Baylor game, he was like 14, 15 touchdowns, only one interception on the year. Trevor Knight never came close to that. So I don't think it was a Trevor Knight. I don't think it is a Trevor Knight situation. Um, and he's still developing. I think he'll be a really good, a really good team. Or sorry, he will be a really good quarterback. I think it just takes some time, and your vision improves the more and more you play, the more reps at the high level. So definitely, a lot of talk about Marcus Major. Not sure why he's not getting guys here. Um, it's good question as any. I don't know why he hasn't played as much as he has. Very little surprising to me. Um, could be a Fiesta Bowl team. You're right. Absolutely. You can talk all day long, but who is better gets determined on the field. Yeah, I don't know what that means. I mean, this is a this is a podcast. What we do is talk. So, I mean, you're right, but I mean, this is what we do. This is part of this is just discussion of the games. But yeah, you're right, but don't really understand the comment. Um, Decision is Wash had an easy schedule, could have played in Dallas for the playoffs. Chester, I think you're right in so many ways here. I think coming into the season, this is why I had this Oklahoma team as a playoff or bust, or even really I felt like this team needed to make a national championship game. Really big for the future of this program, and given where they are these next 2 games, let's just say worst case scenario, they lose both of these games to Oklahoma State. They don't make the playoffs. They don't win a Big 12 championship. It's a massively disappointing year for Oklahoma. I think right now, a successful year would be winning the Big 12 championship game, or winning the Big 12 championship and maybe getting yourselves into the playoff conversation. But I think even if you're, an 11-2, 10-3 season is just really kind of unacceptable based on exactly what you've said. The schedule played out really, really well for Oklahoma, just in terms of the difficulty or lack thereof. That's the reason why Oklahoma's point blank. The reason why Oklahoma's 10-1 is because of the schedule. The schedule has not been as strong, as in the past. So, yep, you're absolutely right. Defense, without that, won the game. Why would Lincoln leave when he has a top 5 2020 class and the number 1 23 class, and he's going to the SEC? I think there's a couple of things, Cam, where the reason why I'm not saying that he will, and I don't necessarily think that he will. Money, obviously, Oklahoma would be unwilling to pay him the amount of money that it looks like LSU is willing to pay. I think LSU is willing to do almost anything to win. I don't know that Oklahoma's in that same boat, just because of kind of the politics within Oklahoma. I think the specifically OU's compliance department, it does not do Oklahoma any favors on exactly what they're willing to let happen. I'm not saying cheat, but what they're willing to let happen. And so, I mean, and you're right. You make you make good points in terms of the recruiting class. Although I don't think Oklahoma's top five right now for 2022. I think they're in the 7 or 8 range. But I think Oklahoma, is probably a little bit easier to compete at the in the obviously in the SEC from a recruiting perspective. And I think the one thing to think about, Cam, is, and I know a lot of people don't want to think this, but it's going to happen. Oklahoma's going to take some lumps in the SEC the first couple of years. Whether it's next year or whether it's a couple of years down the road, they're just going to. Oklahoma's probably if Oklahoma's in the SEC this year, Oklahoma's probably 6-4 right now, 7-4 maybe, 6-5 maybe. I think so. I think Oklahoma's going to have to get a lot better these next 2 years to be able to compete at a high level week in and week out with the SEC, because um, there's teams are much tougher. Texas A&M, Ole Miss, like Alabama, Auburn, like LSU, Arkansas. These teams are gunning for you, and they're ready to play every single week. We're not playing, Kansas, TCU, um, even Kansas State to a certain degree. So it's going to be tougher, without a doubt. Um, Baker's worst game against Iowa State and lost. This game was rough to play, especially for the first time. That's fair. That's a fair point. Um, Agree with that without a doubt. Well, I think about Oklahoma State defense this year. So I think they're one of the best in the country. I think they're probably top 10, top 15 nationally. I'll pull this up in a minute, but I think Oklahoma State's defense, I think, and again, a lot of people might take this the wrong way. I think the way the Oklahoma State football team as a whole is what Oklahoma thought they would be this season. They were completely dominant against TCU. They've played really well. They started slow, but they've continued to get better and better and better every single week, on the defensive side of the ball, particularly. So, yeah, I think Oklahoma State's defense is really, really strong, and Oklahoma's going to have a hard time moving the football. Oklahoma's defense is going to have to play really, really well to keep them in the game. I have a hard time seeing Oklahoma getting more than about 24 points in this game, if I'm being honest. So the defense has to come ready to play and play very strong this game. All right, I think the defense is decent now. The late game woes you attribute to fatigue. Part of that's, yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. I thought the scheme was pretty poor the last drive or two, keeping Kolar open, basically all drive, and they just kept going to him and going to him. It was a little, Ryan's a little reminiscent of the Stoops game, the Mike Stoops game, where Baylor continued to run, these out routes all the way down the field and nickel and dime to Oklahoma. It looked like that to a certain degree, just in terms of allowing him to stay wide open um, through the whole um, through that last couple of drives. I assume this is very sarcastic and condescending in nature. Oklahoma expected to be no worse than 10-1 at this point, and if you look at this team and they are not a massive disappointment based on the way they're playing on the field, based on what they were expected to play, on how good they were expected to be, you're just not watching, and you're just not being realistic. This team is disappointing in the way they played. Now, having said that, they do have an opportunity to make it right these last two games, but to this point, this has been a disappointing season without a doubt. Okay, but when you say Notre Dame Wake Forest, so and so is better, get the game on the field and let the outcome. Okay, so again, they're not going to play Notre Dame. They're not going to play Wake Forest. They're not going to play all of these teams. So all we have to do is to talk about it. They may play one of these teams in the bowl game. Um, so all we can go by is talking about who we think is better right now. And I would say Notre Dame is better than Oklahoma. I think Notre Dame would beat Oklahoma on a neutral field. I think Oklahoma is better than Michigan State. I think Oklahoma probably would be able to beat them on a neutral field, and I think Wake Forest would be a really, really good game. And I mean, I wouldn't be upset to see Oklahoma play Wake Forest in a championship game. I mean, not a championship game, but in a bowl game. So looking at some of the scores right now, you've got just if you guys aren't watching, you got Alabama up 10-0 over Arkansas. You've got Michigan up 14-3 over Maryland. Setting up that game next week. Notre Dame is just obliterating Georgia Tech 45-0, just starting the second half. Iowa's up 20-16 in a game that's a little closer than I thought would be against um, against Illinois. Let's look down here. We've got Pittsburgh up 14-7 over Virginia. Wisconsin's up 14-7 over Nebraska in a game that you just assume is going to go down. You kind of go down to the wire here. Kind of below the radar game, but very kind of interesting for me looking at UAB and UTSA in the at Conference USA. UTSA undefeated so far. UAB up 21-14, second quarter there. Let's see any other games of interest. Cincinnati is really dominating this game against SMU 20-0 right now. So I think that those are most of the games of interest that you guys would have. Tulsa's up 10-0 over Temple in the first quarter at home. Locally, TCU and Kansas are tied at 7. And then UCLA is up 7-3 over USC in the Pac-12 rivalry game there. Um, so yeah, just like I said, just looking at this, if you're an Oklahoma fan, regardless, cheer for Kansas State tonight. You want a Kansas State win to at least solidifies Oklahoma's spot in the Big 12 championship game, regardless of what happens next week. And then obviously, you hate to cheer for Oklahoma State, but just you know don't don't cheer for Texas Tech, I guess is the best way to put it. So a lot of good games here down the stretch tonight. Oregon, Utah. You've got, as we mentioned, Oklahoma State and Texas Tech is at 7 p.m. I believe 4:30 is Baylor and Kansas State, so we can watch all that, and then got a lot of good games next week. Going forward for the rest of the year. Thanksgiving weekend is a always good weekend, and then uh, and then you have um, a championship weekend the week after. Hopefully, Oklahoma's playing in that Big 12 championship game. I think one of the things that's kind of interesting. It doesn't really mean anything more than that if Oklahoma makes this Big 12 championship game, this will mark Oklahoma has played a different team every single year that they've won or a um, played played in the Big 12 championship game. They've beaten TCU, they've beaten Texas, they've beaten Baylor, and then now they'll probably have that chance against Oklahoma State next week. Yeah, Ryan, we'll get into that a little bit deeper. I'm kind of with you. If I'm being truthful, I think based on the way Oklahoma played against Baylor, I had my doubts whether or not Oklahoma could win this game, but I think given the fact that it's at Oklahoma State, given the fact that Oklahoma State's better, and for the first time in a while, Oklahoma State will be favored in this game, probably by a couple of points, maybe a field goal, but I, Oklahoma State will be favored in this game. I think the one thing that there's a couple of things that you look at that could potentially be a positive for Oklahoma. Mike Gundy has performed very, very poorly against Oklahoma, just from a win-loss perspective. But his game plans and the way his approach has been really bad in the past. So I think the psychological edge goes to Oklahoma. I think The fact that Oklahoma State um, hasn't won a Big 12 championship from the in the championship game format. They've only won that one a few years ago, 2011, I believe it was. They've not won since then. So I think it'll be interesting. Just looking at the players on the field and the talent on the field, I think that Oklahoma State certainly has the edge based on the way they're playing. But hey, if Oklahoma can find a way to put it together and play a complete game, then they have the opportunity to win this game. But yeah, I agree with you. It'll be tough to win as well. So, well, thanks everybody for joining. Like I said, we will come make sure that you guys follow me on Twitter. It is at JasonRay1. We will next Wednesday we will have our me and Mark Rogers will go live Wednesday and then talk about the Bedlam matchup, recap a little bit of this Iowa State looking forward, talk about playoff opportunities and things like that after the rest of the games. Um, and then obviously next Saturday night post game we will have post game thoughts of Bedlam and everything that transpired. So, like I said, thanks everybody. Come follow me. Thanks everybody for joining. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button. Um, thanks for um, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. God bless and Boomer Sooner.